Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to Sweetwater Soundcheck. This time out, an incredibly full-featured audio interface from Arturia. Let's get started. Today we're checking out AudioFuse, a new audio interface from Arturia that connects to your computer by USB and offers an incredible range of connectivity and features. AudioFuse includes 14 ins and outs, Midi I/O, and even a built-in USB hub. It'll serve as a centerpiece for your studio if you're field recording, and you can even connect it to your iPad for iOS recording and playback. AudioFuse can be powered either using a DC power supply, which is included with the unit, or it can be bus powered from a Mac or a PC. You do need to use a power supply if you're using it with an iOS device. What really changes when you're using the DC power supply versus bus powering it from the computer is the amount of headroom that's available. With the DC power supply, you get 24 dB of headroom on the input and the output. When you're bus powering, you get 18 dB on both input and output. 18 dB is still fine for just about any application. When you're running with the DC power supply, you can also use the built-in USB hub to bus power 3 different devices. Having that USB hub on board is very handy for expanding the number of USB connections on your computer. It allows you to hook up dongles, hook up a master keyboard, whatever you might be using via USB can be connected here and still be accessed from your computer. Let's begin with a tour of the back panel and check out the connectivity. The AudioFuse can access up to 4 analog inputs simultaneously, and 2 of those inputs have mic or instrument level preamps built in. The connections for inputs 1 and 2, whether microphone, line level, or instrument level, are on the front panel. Analog inputs 3 and 4 are on the back panel. Analog inputs 3 and 4 can be set for line level input, analog 3 can be set for instrument level input, and you can also switch 3 and 4 so that they accept input from a phono preamp. And that phono preamp is built in and accessible right here. You switch the function of those inputs using the included control panel software, which we'll look at shortly. We have 8 analog outputs, 2 pairs of stereo speaker outs, and you can switch between those using a switch here on the front panel or using the control panel software. And we also have 2 independent headphone outputs here on the front panel. Those headphone outputs have both 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch connections, so you don't need to look for an adapter for your headphones. With the speaker output, headphone output 1, and headphone output 2, you can be running 3 simultaneous mixes, so you could have a main mix going out of the speaker outputs, a Q mix going out of headphone 1, and a separate Q mix going out of headphone 2. You select among those sources using a switch here on the front panel that we'll look at in just a second, or you can also do it using the control panel software. When you're recording to analog inputs 1 or 2, you can also use 2 insert points that are on the back panel. You could connect a compressor, an EQ, and use that while you're recording. You can also use those insert jacks as direct line inputs that bypass the preamps and go straight to the analog to digital converters. As far as digital I/O, we have both 8-channel ADAT and stereo SPDIF. You can also connect an external word clock and synchronize the AudioFuse to whatever digital system you're using. The Midi in and Midi out connections are on the back panel, and those are 1/8 inch connectors. The AudioFuse includes breakout cables, so you can hook up any Midi devices. As you can see, AudioFuse offers a wide range of connectivity possibilities. It's well set up to serve as the hub for your studio, whether you're using digital audio, analog audio, USB, or Midi. One of the things I really like about AudioFuse is that almost all of the functionality is available on the front panel without going into a single menu. There are dedicated buttons for every function. On the top left, we have a button that opens the software control panel, and we'll check that out in a second. On the upper right, we have a control for direct monitoring. Now this allows for latency-free recording when you're overdubbing. That ranges from direct, where you're listening to just the signal that's coming into the AudioFuse, or you can turn it all the way to computer and just monitor what's coming back from the computer. Those would be the tracks you're playing along with. And when you're overdubbing, you want to be somewhere in the middle where you're blending those two together so you can hear the tracks and you can also hear the incoming signal and overdub with no latency. Input channels 1 and 2 are the channels that have our preamps built in for instrument and microphones, and those are controlled here and here. Each of those offers 48-volt phantom power, even when you're running bus powered. It also offers phase invert. We have a pad. When you push that button once, you get a level boost. When you push it second time, you get a pad. That reduces the level in case you're clipping the signal. And finally, when you have an instrument plugged in, the bottom button selects instrument mode. Below this is a rotary control for setting the level for the preamp, and we have LED meters that run alongside these controls that allow us to see the level of our incoming signal. The microphone preamps have plenty of gain on tap, even for very low-level signals, up to 75 dB or even more. And in fact, each individual AudioFuse comes with a certificate that tells you the specifications. The EIN noise rating for this particular unit is better than 131 dB. The frequency response ranges from 20 Hz to 20 kHz, and check out this rating. It's flat within 0.056 dB from 20 Hz to 20 kHz. That's incredibly flat response. The certificate also shows us the gain range for each of the preamps. In this case, they range from 2 dB to 75.2 dB here, or 76.5 dB here. Plenty of gain on tap. In the center of the front panel of the AudioFuse is our monitor control section. A large knob sets the level, and you can see the level of that as you're turning it. Those two bands also serve as LED meters, showing us the level of the output. The far left switch selects what mix is feeding into our speaker outputs. We can set that for Q1, Q2, or when both LEDs are lit, we're listening to the main mix coming back from the computer. We have a mono switch for summing the stereo outputs. We have a dim switch, and you can set the amount of dim using the control panel software. We can also completely mute the monitors. And the final switch here selects between the two sets of speaker outputs, speaker A and speaker B. At the bottom we have our controls for the two headphone outputs, and those are independently addressable. So each headphone output has a switch for selecting the source, Q1, Q2, or main. We can also mono the headphone send. And finally, each headphone output has its own level control. In the center at the bottom is our Talkback. There's a built-in Talkback mic, and it feeds into two stereo outputs that will go into your computer or can be routed to any of those output sources here on the AudioFuse, the speakers, or either of the headphones. We select that by pressing and holding. One other really cool feature. Speaker B can actually be switched so that you can use it as a reamp output from your computer. So if you have a direct recorded guitar in your DAW, you could route it out to an amplifier and re-record it with a new sound. Now let's check out the AudioFuse Control Center software. You can open the AudioFuse software either via your computer or just by hitting the button on the upper left of the AudioFuse. The AudioFuse Control Center offers us access to a variety of different settings. Now again, most of them duplicate what's happening here on the front panel, but there are a few deeper settings that are available only here in the AudioFuse Control Center. On the upper left, we have our digital settings, so our clock rate, available from 44.1 kHz up to 192 kHz with 24-bit resolution. We can set our clock source to internal or external. We can also select the format for our digital input and our digital output independently. The output can be SPDIF, ADAT, with word clock I/O if we like, and digital input can also be set for SPDIF, ADAT, and word clock. In the center, we can see our controls from the front panel. Here's our input channel controls. Our monitor controls are here, and our headphone controls are here. Here on the upper right is where we set the input format for inputs 3 and 4, whether they're phono or line. We can choose phono, which feeds in through the two 1/8" phono preamp inputs, and if we turn that off, we're using the two 1/4" balanced analog inputs. We can pad those inputs independently, and input 3 can also be set to instrument level. We can stereo link those two channels, and each has its own independent gain control. At the bottom is where we set up our direct monitoring mix, input 1, input 2, 3, and 4. We have our mix routing here for main, Q1, Q2, and our Talkback, and we can choose what the Talkback feeds, speaker, phones 1, phones 2, and a level control for the Talkback mic. We can also choose to route the mix that's feeding headphone output 2 to speaker B. So if you want to set up a separate headphone amplifier and have it feed a headphone system in your studio, you can do that using the speaker B outputs. In addition to these settings, we also have a preferences panel that gives us access to some really deep functions. So for example, we can choose the power mode. And here's where we can choose auto, where it powers basically whatever you've plugged in is how it chooses to operate. And it'll be at 24 dB when you're running a power supply or 18 dB when you're not. We also have two mix-down modes, and in those modes the inputs are disconnected or disabled. So we just have the full bandwidth available for our outputs. And again, you can either run those on the power supply for 24 dB or off bus power for 18 dB. We can choose the skin that we're looking at for our software panel. We can link the output level of speaker outputs A and B, or you can run them independently. We also have trim level available for speaker outputs A and B, so you can match the level of those to the different monitors that you're feeding. Here's where we set our dim level. We can set termination for our digital input here. One more thing we set here in the AudioFuse Control Center, and that's reamping. We do that by selecting from phone 2 and choosing reamping. We can also ground lift that output if we're having problems with ground loops. I hope you've enjoyed this look at the AudioFuse from Arturia. It's an incredibly full-featured audio interface. Connects by USB to Mac, PC, or iOS, offers tons of connectivity and lots of features. Whether you're working in your studio and using it as the hub for everything you're doing, or you're taking it on the road for remote recording, it's a great solution. And when you do take it on the road, it even comes with a cover that just snaps over the top to protect it when you throw it in your computer bag. Thanks for joining me for Sweetwater Soundcheck. I'm Mitch Gallagher.